In 1720, the British Empire, the most powerful entity on Earth, was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
Sir Isaac Newton proved that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But even he didn't realize that
a century of constant warfare had left a mountain of debt so high it seemed insurmountable. The government was desperate, and in desperation, people turned to miracles. Their miracle had a name: the South Sea Company. On paper, it was a trading corporation with an exclusive monopoly on trade with the Spanish colonies in South America, a treasure chest of unimaginable riches. But in reality, it was a phantom, a ghost ship built not of timber and sail, but of paper promises and audacious lies. The company had no ships, no goods, and no real access to the fabled riches of the New World. All it had was a royal charter and a breathtakingly bold plan to absorb the entire national debt of Great Britain. This wasn't just a business proposal. It was a psychological contagion designed to infect an entire nation. And as the company's stock began its hypnotic upward climb, one of the greatest minds in human history was watching. From the quiet shadows of his study, Sir Isaac Newton, the man who had decoded the laws of gravity and motion, attempted to apply the rigid logic of physics to the unpredictable chaos of the human soul. He was about to learn a brutal lesson: that the forces governing greed and fear are far more volatile than the movements of the planets. The architect of this grand illusion was John Blunt, a director of the South Sea Company. Blunt was a master of market manipulation, a puppeteer who understood that people don't just buy stock. They buy dreams, status, and the intoxicating promise of a new social standing. To fuel the fire, he pioneered a revolutionary and lethal financial weapon: buying shares on credit. The public was invited to put down just 10% of the share price, a practice we now call margin trading. This created a vicious cycle of artificial demand. As more people bought on credit, the price soared, attracting even more buyers, all desperate to own a piece of the dream. Blunt orchestrated a symphony of whispers, rumors of secret gold mines, of imminent peace treaties with Spain, of royal family members investing heavily. He turned the coffee houses and drawing rooms of London into echo chambers of hype, transforming the entire city into a giant, ticking clockwork bomb. And at the very heart of this mechanism sat Newton, the master of time and calculation, tragically unaware that the gears were engineered to grind him and his fortune into dust. But Blunt's genius wasn't limited to public manipulation.
to sell a lie to the many, you must first buy the few. And in 1720, the price of a politician was surprisingly low.
The South Sea directors didn't just lobby the government, they absorbed it. They executed a plan of systemic corruption that was staggering in its audacity. They secretly offered what they called fictional stock to key members of Parliament and the royal court. These influential figures didn't have to pay a single shilling for their shares. Instead, they were simply promised the profits once the price inevitably rose. It was a silent bribe, a financial betrayal on a national scale. By making the nation's lawmakers his undeclared business partners, John Blunt had created an invisible state. The company and the government were now one and the same. In this new reality, questioning the South Sea Company was not just bad business. It was an act of disloyalty. The truth itself became a crime. This shadow third the unholy alliance between corporate power and political authority ensured that no matter how dangerously high the bubble inflated, the fall would be cushioned not for the investors, but for the insiders paid for by the future ruin of the public.
Newton was a man of patterns. He saw the curve of the bubble, and for a brief moment he was the smartest man in the room.
In the spring of 1720, as the frenzy was building, Newton made a move of characteristic brilliance. He saw the irrationality, he calculated the risk, and he sold his entire holding of South Sea stock. He walked away with a clean profit of £7,000, an immense fortune at the time, more than enough to ensure a life of luxury. He had seen the signs of insolvency long before anyone else. He had used his peerless intellect to escape the gravitational pull of the crowd. Content, he returned to his laboratory, to the predictable and comforting world of numbers and celestial mechanics, believing he had solved the chaotic equation of the market. But logic is a fragile shield against the searing heat of other people's success. The stock didn't fall. It didn't even slow down after Newton sold. The price rocketed from £300 a share to 500, then an unbelievable 800. All around him, Newton saw his friends, his colleagues, people he privately considered his intellectual inferiors, becoming overnight millionaires. Their sudden, ostentatious wealth was a constant public rebuke to his own cautious logic. This is the raw power of crowd psychology. The fear of missing out isn't just a feeling, it's a chemical assault on the rational brain. Newton, a man of colossal ego, could not bear the thought that the world was accelerating beyond his ability to calculate it. The man who had defined the laws of the universe began to doubt his own genius. The mirage of the golden age was too powerful, its light too blinding. The logic that had unveiled the secrets of the cosmos was being systematically dismantled by the simple, primal envy of watching his neighbors get rich. And so he broke. In the summer of 1720, at the absolute peak of the mania, Sir Isaac Newton re-entered the market.
The hardest thing for a genius to watch isn't a failure, it's the success of a fool.
He didn't just reinvest his profits. He threw nearly his entire life savings into the fire, a sum equivalent to over $5 million today. He bought shares at the dizzying price of nearly £1,000 apiece. He was buying at the precise moment the insiders, the architects of the scheme, were silently preparing their escape. He had fallen for the future faking of the company, believing the lies of eternal growth. Unwittingly, the world's greatest scientist had become the host for the financial predators. He had forgotten his own first law of motion. A body in motion stays in motion until it collides with a wall. While Newton was congratulating himself on his bold entry into the greatest investment of the century, the directors were quietly executing the cold discard they were selling, not in a panic, but with cold, calculated precision. They used the public's frantic buying, the very excitement they had manufactured, as their personal exit ramp. They knew the well of new money, the liquidity, was about to run dry. It is the oldest story of financial betrayal. They swapped their worthless paper for the public's hard-earned gold, leaving the crowd to hold a hollow bag. From the outside, the bubble was still perfectly round, shimmering with the promise of infinite wealth. But on the inside, it was now an empty shell, waiting for the first tiny pinprick of reality to arrive. That pinprick came in August. The whispers in the coffee houses changed. The questions, once silenced by the roar of the rising market, became too loud to ignore. Where are the trading ships? Where is the gold from Peru? When will the dividends be paid? In a market built entirely on hype and forward momentum, a moment's pause is a death sentence. The illusion shattered. People who had been desperate to buy were now desperate to sell, only to discover a terrifying truth. The buyers had vanished. This is the stark reality of insolvency. The music had stopped. Newton, watching the stock ticker, must have felt a cold dread creep into his bones, a feeling of freefall that defied all his laws of physics. The stock plunged to 800, then 700. He held on, praying for a rebound, a return to sanity. But the laws of a market crash are unforgiving. Once faith is lost, the gold turns to air. The collapse was total. The stock price plummeted from nearly £1,000 a share to a mere 135. In a matter of weeks, Newton's entire fortune, over £20,000, had vaporized. He wasn't just broke. He was profoundly humiliated. The man who had mapped the heavens had been comprehensively outsmarted by a gang of greedy merchants. He retreated from public life, his brilliant mind recoiling back into the predictable safety of mathematics. He would later utter the famous bitter words, "I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people." For the rest of his life, he enforced a stonewalling silence. The words South Sea were forbidden from ever being spoken in his presence. The fallout was a national trauma. An enraged parliament launched investigations, seizing the assets of the South Sea directors to try and compensate the victims. But what they recovered were mere crumbs compared to the vast wealth that had been destroyed. Some directors fled the country, others were imprisoned, and a few, facing utter ruin and disgrace, took their own lives. But the true winners, the shadow third of corrupt politicians who had taken the bribes and enabled the fraud, largely remained in power. They had layers of asset protection the common man could never dream of.
The mob looks for a throat to squeeze, but the real culprits are already gone.
The South Sea bubble had been a harvest, and the British public was the crop. Newton's fatal mistake was in thinking the market was a science governed by rules. It wasn't. It was, and always is, a hunt. Yet, not everyone was a victim. There was another man, a printer and bookseller named Thomas Guy. He was no scientific genius, but he was a master of something far more valuable in the world of finance, himself. He bought South Sea stock early, and as the price began its insane climb, he sold. Not all at once, but steadily, systematically, taking profits along the way. He never let the FOMO, the madness of the crowd, cloud his judgment. He walked away with a colossal fortune, which he then used to found Guy's Hospital, an institution of healing and care that stands in London to this day. He is the grey rock of the 1720 crash, the man the predators couldn't hook, because he had no ego for them to catch. He proved that in the market, emotional intelligence is infinitely more powerful than raw intellect. History never repeats itself exactly, but its rhythms and patterns are undeniable. Today, every time a new miracle technology, a new form of digital gold, or a new business model promises to defy the laws of financial gravity, the ghosts of 1720 walk among us once more. We live in an age of sophisticated future faking and dazzling golden mirages, where the tools of manipulation are digital and instantaneous. Isaac Newton's story is not a tale of stupidity. It is a profound and timeless lesson in the fragility of human reason. In the face of overwhelming greed, remember his story. When the promises sound too good to be true, when the hype feels inescapable, look for the strings, because in the end, the house always has an edge, and gravity always wins. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into financial history insightful, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories.